Welcome to this Degenerate Friday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForest. Very happy to have you guys with us. Going to dive into, and it's odd for me because I don't think I've ever faced a time in my life where my future was any more uncertain. Now, we know the days are numbered here because I've already gone well past the Mendoza line for men, and many of the underplayers had 73 and a hook as the number that I would either check out over or under on. And they were extremely when I made it to 74. But futures are interesting to dabble in sports. We welcome the professor to the.
This is a cheery show I've joined.
Yeah, well, I'm just talking about the uncertainty of anybody's future, for that matter. I mean, we've heard it referenced in sports. Look, Jerry Jones in his contract dispute with Micah Parsons happened to mention, what if he gets hit by a car tomorrow? We had that famous thing with Kyle Shanahan when he was asked if so and so was going to be on the roster, and he said, "I don't even know if any of us are going to be alive tomorrow." So yeah, I mean, it's odd to speculate on the future, and then you know me with my impatience and my screen to screen betting habits at the track. I can't wait for the next post time.
Oh, I'm actually inclined to agree with you. I'm not a big futures fan. So we're
Yeah.
talking about them now basically as a byproduct of this. We're waiting for the season to start and nothing, and we don't have actual games to talk about until next week, unless you want to talk about NFL preseason, which I do not particularly want to talk about. Um, so there's that. But you know, I'm not a big futures guy myself, but I think there are, certainly some interesting numbers to talk about for the people who do like to dabble in futures, of which obviously there's a great number of them because, in our modern look, let's be honest, both you and I, and most of the guys we know who are, longtime hardcore degenerate, are completely out of tune with what like people like to go on these days. Like,
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I was looking at this guy that was handicapping. I actually made mention of it here earlier this week. Guy named Svoboda, who is writing in the space that used to be occupied by Las Vegas Sports Information Network, and now is something called Top Play in my New York Post, right? So this guy's recommending, and with absolutely spot on logic. I mean, logic that you could easily embrace and say, "Wow, that's a pretty strong case this guy just made." Holy Perry Mason! He was predicting home runs
yeah,
in games.
again,
And
baseball
he
season.
hit 2 nights. I mean, he hit the lone guy he spotted was Juan Soto a couple of nights ago. Comes right back and names three guys on the Mets to hit home runs the following day against the Braves. Two of them do it, and because if he didn't parlay all three, if he did any combination thereof, he made a fortune on this. So it's crazy, right?
Baseball season has turned more maniacal maybe than any that you look at what's popular with baseball season, it's like these strikeout props and home
Yeah.
run props. And the one that really boggles my freaking mind is this no run first inning thing that seems
Who
to be
thinks in the first?
hugely popular
Yes.
with younger betters. So like I said, you know, guys like you and I who, grew up with you played games.
Yeah. Geezer's excuse.
You played sides, you played totals, felt really confident. Maybe you put together a 2 or 3 team parlay. And let's be honest, kind of laughed at the people who did the suckers.
Yeah.
Like I spent my whole life laughing at teaser players, and now like nobody bets straights anymore. Like nobody just plays sides and totals anymore. So
It doesn't seem as popular.
you
That's
got to roll with the times. I mean, I don't think. Let's put it this way: of the things that have gained popularity, I don't think futures, despite the fact that it ties up your money forever, is necessarily the craziest thing of you know
Yeah, it
trends
depends
people
how you
like.
approach it. Like I was involved in a couple of campaigns, as you well know, on the radio through a sponsor of ours. So where we were encouraging people to, and we were rooting for the Marlins, who were horrible at the time, to eclipse the over, which were always very modest totals, and it happened to rhyme and be something that you could make a car allusion to. So we had the drive for 75.
I remember that.
You had the 74 and a hook number. And I have to say this, I mean, it came down to the final weekend of the season. We ended up losing as we were encouraging the over, trying to root for the local team there behind the sponsor. And, knowing full well that in all likelihood the under was going to be what took place. And it came down to the final weekend when the Marlins had to face on the road when they were both with the New York Mets, Jacob deGrom and Noah Syndergaard on back-to-back nights, and lost a couple of gut-wrenching, heartbreaking one-run games.
By the
And
way, I
that's
should
how we
note.
lost. I mean, we got our money's worth for the season. That's for sure.
By the way, I should note for the audience that neither Defo or I are completely rational when it comes to this stuff. I know
Yeah.
Defo is the king of I want to play 3-team parlays,
Yes.
where it is virtually guaranteed I will go 2-1. I'm going to go 2-1 99.6% of the time.
And
And
feel
me,
good about losing.
I just had a great example last weekend. I will only touch golf during the majors, which is
Oh,
probably
wow.
the
Wow.
least rational place to play golf. Then I
Yes.
turn around and look at the St. Jude leaderboard last week, and it is nothing but guys I bet on in the British Open. Like
Justin Rose.
it was just Rose and Spawn was number 2,
Yeah.
and there's like 3 other guys. Everybody but the dentist, who was I think 2 shots back. Everybody else who I had played the British Open finished within 3 shots of the lead, with Rose winning
What was Rose,
in the St.
100 to
Jude.
1? Was he
I have
100 to
no
1 in that?
idea. I
I think he
honestly,
was.
I didn't look, and I don't want to look
I
at
believe
what
he was
he was.
100 to 1 because
Because as you know, I will never make a golf bet on anything but the majors. I
you're going to
don't,
have to expand your horizons on that.
even during the time of the year where there's nothing else to watch. Like
Yeah.
or if I were going to play golf, that would probably be the time of year I should do it.
Well, I mean, that I thought of you right away because I was looking at the golf guy in the same spot, top play, that was handicapping this upcoming tournament, whatever's going on this week. And they mentioned that he hit Justin Rose at 100 to 1 the previous week as one of his 3 plays.
I would have had the top 2. I would have had Rose and Spawn. I've been betting Spawn most of the year, except the
Imagine
U.S.
when you can
Open
bet
when he won.
exactas in golf. Quinellas. That'll
Yeah,
be awesome.
imagine what that would have paid.
All right. So we are going to engage and indulge in some futures. It can be fascinating. Depends on your level of patience for this type of bet. Like the professor says, it's like tying up your money. It's kind of like when teams take your playoff money for tickets, even though they don't make the playoffs, and they have it in their bank for that they tell you, hey, listen, we're going to go ahead and hold this for your future season tickets once the playoffs don't take place or don't occur. But yeah, I mean, you can get a season's worth of entertainment out of it, making one wager, and oftentimes your instincts will prove to be correct. I
Well, you can
believe.
also get into a situation where it comes the last week of the season where you can, if you
Good
have
edge, yes.
played aggressively enough, you can come up with some very favorable hedges as
Yeah.
get to the end of the year, and honestly, probably some middles too.
How many
Uh,
times are you completely wrong about a team and its prospects? I mean, just so far off. I'm with college football. I guess it can happen because teams come out of
I
nowhere.
mean, occasionally, but it's been the Lane Kiffin, Matt Barkley USC team, the year that they left Lane Kiffin on the tarmac, wouldn't let him on the team playing because he was fired in Phoenix. That would be one I was completely wrong about
That's an
that team.
embarrassing moment in anybody's career. Yeah, when they just leave you at the airport.
Um,
Yeah.
I honestly, I would have told you I was wrong about the Notre Dame team last year, particularly after that early season loss to Northern Illinois. I did not think there was a chance in hell, even with a really friendly schedule, that they would rebound for that and actually win some playoff games.
Who
So I
was
think
it with the Panthers? Was it Jacques Martin when he got fired that they left him in some snowdrift in Saskatchewan? They'd actually tossed him off the team bus, and Yager was with the team at the time, and he's throwing a guy his bag out the window of the bus, and they just left him
speaking
in the Yukon somewhere.
speaking of coaches, and this is how out of loop I get during baseball season because I just realized last week when they premiered it that Hard Knocks was doing the Buffalo Bills this year. And
Yes.
my question is when is Sean McDermott going to have time and privacy to plan terrorist attacks when he's got these HBO cameras around him? Like,
Yeah.
his friends at Al Qaeda got to be really pissed off about these HBO cameras being around 24.
Wait, let me do a public disclosure here. Those were the thoughts and words and expressions of the professor and the
Oh,
professor.
wait, you know the history there, right?
Not familiar with McDermott and any terrorist ties.
He did a team speech that he very close nearly got fired for, and it was a
In
big
Arabic?
deal
What did he do?
a couple of years ago, where he was talking to the team and he was talking about the concept of coming together as a team to accomplish a goal. Everybody combining, and he was like the terrorists did on 9/11,
9/11. Oh, nice.
and it became like a really big deal,
I could see
particularly
that. Yeah.
on the internet. They still
That
love to
that's,
post it.
cancel culture. I mean, that's what No Filter was originally, based on. I mean, and in
Anyway,
this case, maybe well deserved at that point. All right, so we're gonna look at a couple of futures in conferences here, and, you've analyzed, several teams, and we're going with the heavyweights, this time, the SEC. So, what do you foresee there for the people that are looking to bet the futures?
well, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, we looked at the ACC and the Big 12. We figured out this week we would go with the SEC and the Big 10, who, of course, are the big boys of college football. We'll start in the SEC. The top three teams, you've got Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, all sitting at 9.5 for the season. I think for the most part, you're probably looking more towards the underside on Texas and Alabama. I think Alabama kind of in a transition.
Yeah.
What is Kalen DeBoer going to look like as the Alabama head coach, depending on how long he lasts? Because I don't know that he will survive another season like that. I don't know. I don't know if he's got another loss of Andy in him without getting left on the tarmac. Um,
I would imagine rampant impatience naturally. Yeah,
I mean, you
yeah,
look at Alabama again. Function much more as traditional old school football, toughness, gritty, whatever you want to call it,
right.
built around the line of scrimmage. S-
Give
Talented
him
skill
400
position
pound
players.
line. Yeah.
Yeah, talented skill position players to be sure, but the team is really built around old school football.
Yes.
DeBoer has not been that coach. And I mean, he's a guy very much customized his offense to Jaden Milroe last year because he was coming in as a first year, and I get that. So there was more, and now he's back to a pocket passer, but he's a guy, he wants to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game. And that has not been the pattern for success for Alabama over the years.
Yeah.
Even the 2020 team with Sark, which is really probably Sark's masterpiece of a team, that set all sorts of offensive records and won a national title, even with a bum like Mac Jones playing quarterback. That was not a traditional Alabama team. They gave up 40 points or more, I think, 3 times during the course of that season. They played shootouts against a bunch of teams, but they kept winning ball games. I don't know that that's going to work under DeBoer. And I think Alabama's kind of in a transition, although they have a somewhat favorable home road breakdown. They do have a road trip to Georgia early in the season. Excuse me. They catch
Yeah.
Florida State at the right time to start the year. But overall, the schedule's reasonably favorable. But I think as Alabama transitions under the Kalen Boer administration there, the Boer administration there, you could see another stubbing of the toe or two, and at 9.5, that many in you.
Yeah.
Texas, again, we've seen it under Sark, probably the most talented teams in terms of if you were just lining up future NFL guys. Maybe them or Penn State probably would be the 1 and 2 in the country. But again, Sark has been vulnerable to more physical football teams, something you're going to see more of in the SEC. And they start the year on the road in Ohio State. Never an easy game. I would be leaning more towards the under on Texas. The one I would look at, and it's just favorable schedule because I don't really love the returning talent. Georgia only returned 7 starters, but obviously they've been insanely deep on defense for pretty much the entire Kirby Smart run there. But again, very favorable schedule. They play Alabama early in the year, but they're at home for it. The home road breakdown. You could make a case, and SEC fans will not like me saying this. You could make a case that Georgia's toughest road game might very well be Georgia Tech at the end of the year. So again, not a very challenging road schedule for the Bulldogs. They get both Texas and Alabama at home, and once again, not playing much of anything. Again, Georgia Tech's better than usual, but that's by far and away their toughest game. So if you're looking for an over among those big three, I would go with Georgia, although I wouldn't be inclined to that. I do think there are some very tasty unders in the SEC, and it's funny because they all seem to be sitting at 7.5 a game. Auburn, a lot of people projecting them to vastly improve on year 2 under Hugh Freeze. I don't think the team was that good last year, honestly. Jackson Arnold, transfer from Oklahoma, is an interesting prospect, but again, struggled against big time competition early in the year last year. While at Oklahoma, lost his starting job. I don't know that a jump to 7.5 games is necessarily a smart play there for Auburn. Florida, another team, but Florida's schedule is just ridiculously difficult. People talked about it last year. It's arguably maybe more difficult this year than it was last year when you see home road breakdown. So 7.5 there, again, inclined to under. And Oklahoma, I just don't think. I mean, again, I don't know if you saw this when you were out in Vegas. Oklahoma's quarterback is now caught up in a gambling thing.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody knows how that's going to play out. To me, the story looks dumb, so I assume he's going to play. But
It
we
sounded
thought
like maybe he was going to be absolved of anything, that he was just clowning around.
that's my instincts too. But with all these stories involving online gambling and athletes, they've started off sounding incredibly stupid, and then some of them have turned out to be true. I mean, I go
Yep.
back to the one, was it the Alabama baseball coach who had his friend
Yes.
going in, and somewhere in Ohio. I think it was actually at the Cleveland Indians Stadium in Ohio, and firing away on. I mean, I'm not trying to judge these gambling scandals because honestly, the stupider they sound at the start, it seems like the more likely they are to be true. Jonte Porter faking injuries and
Yes.
all this other nonsense. But they've got a problem there. I'm actually surprised the Oklahoma number is still up. I would think they would take that down. And then you get into, I think, probably the best over in this, and that's Vanderbilt sitting at 4.5. You look at Vandy's schedule, and worth noting, 13 returning starters for Vandy, including the quarterback Diego Pavia, including most of his wide receiver core. Now, they only returned one offensive lineman, so that's a potential problem. But I believe they returned eight starters on defense. That was better than expected last year. You look at their out-of-conference schedule, Virginia Tech to start the season is the toughest game. And again, I don't think Virginia Tech's scaring anybody in 2025. So almost assuredly 3 out of conference wins and very possibly 4 out of conference wins for Vandy on the schedule. You took that means they need 1 or 2 to beat the number in the SEC. I think they got more than 2 winnable games on that schedule. Kentucky figures to be miserable. Missouri doesn't figure to be very good. Auburn comes in the season late, comes into Vanderbilt late. I think Vanderbilt at 4.5 is a very solid over. If you were looking to roll for a season, I think that's one of the better numbers we've talked about in any conference thus far. So again, Commodores over 4.5 would be my best number in the SEC. Most of the rest of the SEC, I'd probably be looking to fade. I think much like last year, we're going to have a situation in the SEC where there's a lot of really good teams, but there's no super team. If there's a super team, it's probably Texas, and people very rightfully have the doubts about Sark in big games, which and the rest of it, honestly, I feel like you're getting into like an any given Saturday situation where you're talking about maybe as many as 6 or 7 teams when you start including a South Carolina, when you start including an LSU, when you start to look at some of these teams capable of competing with each other on any given Saturday. So I think we'll get a lot of results last year when you had a whole batch of 3-loss teams come the end of the season. That's going to make these overs very difficult when teams are losing 3 games in conference. Takes us to the Big Ten, which is a similar situation, but even more top heavy. The 3 favorites in the Big Ten, call them co-favorites, call them 1, 2, 3, whatever you want. Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State all coming in at 10.5 totals. I think for Ohio State, and again, defending national champions, certainly a very high talent level, but how much do you trust Ryan Day, particularly in the regular season? I think you look at the out-of-conference game with Texas, the fact that they have to go they do get Penn State at home. They have to play Michigan again, who has obviously been a huge problem for them. I would be trending under on a 10.5 number, breaking in a new quarterback, losing both running backs from last year's team. Again, not that I doubt the talent level. We all know about Jeremiah Smith. We can assume the rest of the wide receiver core will be full of NFL stars because it has been for basically the last decade at Ohio State. I don't doubt that the raw talent is there, but again, you're breaking in a lot of new faces there for a number that big. Oregon, very similar thing. I also am not sure how much I trust their transfer quarterback. We joked about it on an earlier show. Oregon has had the benefit between Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel of having guys who've been in college 8 years playing their quarterback position in a very complicated offense. Now they're going to a guy who only played as a freshman at UCLA and only part time. I think he only started 6 or 7 games his 1 year at UCLA. Not a lot of experience. There's certainly a lot of raw talent because the kid was a 5-star recruit and looked good in some of his early season starts for UCLA. But I don't know if you can replace that experience factor, particularly in an offense as complicated for the quarterback as Oregon likes to play. So could be maybe relative to the last few years down season in Oregon there for Dan Lanning. We'll see, but my instinct definitely under the 10.5 there. Although of the three, their schedule is probably even friendlier than Penn State's. But Penn State, huge talent level, and I'm a huge doubter of Drew Aller and James Franklin as a game day coach. But at 10.5, you look at Penn State's schedule, there's really only 2 games where they're not going to be a double-digit point spread favorite. That is, they play Ohio State on the road in the middle of the year, and they play Oregon at home early. I think that game will actually be, given the experience, a bigger adjustment for Oregon. So I think they're going to have a very good chance to win that game. Ohio State, middle of the year, they have, I mean, really, if you watch Penn State against top quality Big Ten competition, I don't love them to go in and win that football game. Although maybe this is the year they break through. But if I were going to take an over of those three, it would be Penn State, strictly as a factor of the schedule. Although I think the people, and again, Penn State is either co-favorites or second pick for the national championship along with Texas, depending where you look at the numbers. I don't love Penn State for a national title. Again, I have a lot of people projecting Aller, high draft pick, huge season. I don't like the way the kid plays in big competition games and has throughout his entire Penn State career. I don't love him. So for those kind of runs, not so much for Penn State, but to go over the season total of 10.5, again, it's a 2-game schedule and they got to win. They got to go 500 in 2 games to do that. And for all the criticism of Franklin in big games, which is very justified, he doesn't lose games he should win very often. Like he's not a Mario Cristobal where he throws a random 10-point favorite and it's going to come down to the last play kind of game. He tends to handle the cupcakes very, very easily. I'm looking throughout the Big Ten, trying to look at overs. One we noted, and now I don't know what to do with it. We talked about this, I don't know, a month or 6 weeks ago, just when they started looking at film. And at the time, Michigan was 8. Now Michigan is sitting at 9.5. If you're one of the people who took over at 8, which we were trending towards doing, or recommending, I might be looking to middle this at 9 at this point. Because, again, you look at the schedule, you look at the inexperience at the quarterback position, although they have everything else. Like Michigan's loaded everywhere but quarterback and maybe wide receiver. Their wide receivers are not what I would call the elite class. Outside of the passing game, Michigan has absolute elite talent all over the field, so they could, factor in there somewhere for a playoff spot. But 9.5, I think, is a little ambitious number from a low starting point there. I'm trying to look for someone who I think is a good over.
What do we know of this Underwood? I mean, what do you expect from him? Do we have anything to
super athlete, huge arm,
potential that he's being ascribed?
Super athlete, huge arm, very nice release of the football. If you've seen the videos of him throwing him, quick, compact. Usually with those big, tall guys, you get like a loopy, almost pitching style throwing motion. He doesn't have that. He's got a quick, compact throwing motion. He's got one of those arms that he could throw the ball 75 yards.
Wow.
I don't want to say he's got a Joe Milton arm, but in that range. You look at his high school tape, didn't throw the ball a ton, was more of an athlete. But, I mean, all the potential in the world. But, again, you look at his high school tape, very few guys on his level in terms of competition. He's just a better athlete than everybody on the field. That doesn't always translate well to college football, particularly at the start. I like him. I think there's a ton of potential there. I will be curious to see how much Michigan tries to unleash him as a passer throughout the course of the season. But certainly as a runner, he's going to add a new dimension to that game. And look, we've seen, I get to throw out a name, Jaden Milroe-esque, except much, much bigger. Like, I mean, legit 6'4", 6'5", and in high school, I think he was listed at 205. He looks more like he's in the 220 range now. So like a gigantic Jaden Milroe would be, I think, a pretty good comp for him in terms of players we've seen. And again, we saw when Milroe have some really brilliant games, and we saw him, need a lot of fine tuning too. So, I expect a similar learning curve with Underwood. I think there'll probably be some games this year where he looks like a superstar, and there'll probably be some games this year where he looks like a freshman.
Yeah.
Again, the good thing if you're Michigan is you don't need a whole bunch out of him, particularly if he can add another dimension in the running game. So it's not just our halfbacks running off tackle 57 times a game.
Holy Bo Schembechler. Yeah. I mean, the throwback to the past there. The old Michigan-Ohio State rivalries where it was literally Woody Hayes and the 3 yards in a cloud of dust mentality still on exhibit sometimes there at Michigan. But, yeah, interesting. All right, any other observations there on
Yeah,
the
we haven't given our best in the Big Ten, which is an under. 7.5 on Nebraska. Nebraska has gone under 8 years in a row and 9 years out of the last 10 on their season total. I don't think Scott Frost is in his second go around is going to change that. I expect Nebraska to once go 7.5 and go under. And they start with kind of an underrated Cincinnati team to start the year. Very easily could get off to a bad start for Nebraska once again. We'll see. I know obviously a lot of Huskers fans are counting on Dylan Raiola to be a transformative quarterback. I think he might get there 2 years from now under Frost, but I don't know that Frost has been great at working with first-time starting quarterbacks throughout his career. So I would anticipate yet another year, 9 years in a row of Nebraska going on the title. I'm looking for my best over in the Big Ten. I don't have a great one, but if I were looking for one, I'd look at Wisconsin at 5.5. The out of conference not really that difficult. They do have Alabama. The other 3 games are highly winnable, which means you'd probably be looking at 3 conference wins. I think they're capable of getting 3 conference wins. I think they'll get a little bit. I'm not going to say they're going to get back to Wisconsin football of we're just going to run the ball 400 times in a game, but I do think they'll blend it a little bit better. Last year, I think they forced trying to modernize their offense a little bit too much, and I think we'll see something more similar to the Wisconsin offense we've seen in previous years this season.
They get those huge linemen, man, every year. So it seems, these corn-fed guys that all weigh like 350.
I think it's more beer and cheese and sausage.
Could be the beer cheese, period. All right, Professor, good stuff. We're going to have to skip the big board because we're kind of flat out of time here. But
that works.
Excellent job, as always, with the futures. And next week, we'll be sitting on games, right?
We'll be sitting on week 0 where there's a couple of interesting spots already. Look, Kansas State and Iowa State is probably as good a week 0 game itself, forgetting the action aspect that we've gotten in years. Normally that Ireland game looks like a total mismatch. Obviously, it looked that way last year. It turned out a little different as, Florida State went down huge. But, a top 25 matchup in week 0 and, a couple other semi-interesting spots we'll talk about next week. But, yeah, very excited. 1 week away.
All right. Professor, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us. It's always a pleasure.
You have a great one, Defo.
All right, the professor with us here on Bury Your Bookie. A lot of futures there. As I said, my future extremely uncertain, as I'm sure is the case with many of you. Who the hell knows what's going to happen out there? If you have the patience, though, it can be a lot of fun making those type of wagers. That's for sure. You get your money's worth of entertainment because, I mean, you're asking a lot of some of these heavyweight teams. I think the professor might be right about that. With a little bit more parity in college football, and especially at those levels. If you can find a team that you think is getting hosed on the number and cashing over on what seems like a low-level team, always a lot of fun. It makes it interesting because it's good to be right. So, and if you get a season's worth of entertainment. That year we were following the Marlins in the drive for 75, and they were sitting there at 74. What was really remarkable. I mean, we got. I never followed a team so closely, even though it was a one-time bet. And it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was enough to make the season extremely interesting. Every single out became a huge importance. All right, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much. We'll join you again on Monday. Hopefully, you guys will have some luck on your NFL preseason bets if you're inclined to make those kind of wagers. And for the professor, I'm Jeff DeForest. See you next time on the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.